Hey, everybody. Welcome to Help Solve the Case. I feel like I'm trapped in my chair. Today, we are talking about the Lindsay Clancy trial, and I'm a bit behind because I got irritated with it. And it is still going on with the prosecution's presentation of the case. Unbelievable. But here we go. This is day 8. If you're watching this today, this is from yesterday. I still have a little bit to watch for today because I was working some other cases and things. And I try to keep up. I try to get them done in the same day, but I just could not get it to you today. I did have the Supreme Court, or not the Supreme Court, the federal court's decision on the tower dump. If you haven't seen that video, I think it's very interesting. It's a bit long, but it raises a lot of good points that we can use in our other cases. First of all, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. And let me know what you want to see. Let me know if this is helpful. I believe that all of this lets us know more about our criminal justice system. Thank you all for the wonderful, kind comments. I really appreciate it. It really helps keep me going. And we can use it on different cases. For instance, the information that we were going back and forth, the information on the Tyler Robinson case, what the defense attorney was doing with the DNA, going through all that, helpful on a case today, and helpful the discussions we're having about the Matthew Nilo case, again, helpful on a case today. So it's all important. All right. What happened? This is day 8, which is yesterday, but we're going to treat it like it's today. It was a strange day, but it continued to me that a lot of the Commonwealth witnesses actually sounded like defense witnesses. And I think I mentioned in the last video that while I appreciate her professionalism and succinctness, this on and on, I don't feel is doing her client, the state, any favors. I saw comments in the chat today, watchers like me who are potentially acting like the jury in place of the jury are really ticked off about the length, about the scope, about all this stuff, and feel that this trial has been diluted by so many repetitive witnesses. Now, we heard in some of our other cases, I believe it was Tyler Robinson, that they were talking about, was it the C? It begins with the C, what is it? Consecutive, not consecutiveness, but everything repeating and piling on, repeating the same thing over and over again. And we heard a lot of that. And then I thought we heard, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a prosecutor. Maybe this will serve her case well. If I was a juror at this point, I would be like, heck no. Again, we haven't seen the defense's case. We don't know. Let me get to this. We heard from the Commonwealth again what we've been hearing. Look, she had insomnia, she had anxiety, she was on medication. But when everybody saw her, she looked fine. She was coherent, appropriate, conversational, functional, and engaged. But the defense was like, look, looking normal is not the same thing as being mentally well. And more importantly, most of these people didn't know what was actually happening medically and psychiatrically. And is all of that stuff with the medication, that's the defense theory, is that all visible on the outside? We did hear some testimony today about half-life of some of these medications and different things. What does it take to combust into some type of psychotic episode caused by medication as opposed to some other biological basis? We just don't know. And I mentioned I would like more explanation about why this could have happened or why it did not happen, instead of hearing about, and that's today's thing, but hearing about who was wearing gym clothes at the gym. It's crazy. We heard from the medical examiner, Dr. Kimberly Springer, and this was hard to hear, very hard to hear, talking about the mechanism of death was ligature strangulation, and a ligature is like a rope or other object. And the cause of death was complications of mechanical asphyxia. And the reason that was said was because he was resuscitated and he did not pass away right away. It's just very sad. What else here? The prosecutor doing a good job, I believe, of trying to be in talking to the witnesses, especially around sensitive topics, being very succinct and to the point. But the judge, before they did this, the judge said, "Hey, look, just a reminder, you're probably going to be emotional, but you cannot put emotion into this." And we did not see these photos and stuff. It was not a good scene. The defense basically no cross-examination. The defense made objection to the photographs and evidence, but he didn't disagree with the cause of death. And that's consistent. The defense has been saying, look, like he said from the beginning, we're not saying that this didn't happen. We're talking about the state's accusation and proving what they're saying, that this was intentional, the fake suicide and all this stuff, as opposed to something with Lindsay being out of control that she could not control because of the medications. And then there was a lot of sobbing and crying. In fact, they had to take a break. Then we had the pediatrician, Dr. Lindsay Rochert, talking about Lindsay bringing the children to their appointments. She talked normally. She answered question appropriately. The children were healthy and meeting milestones. And on January 24th, right before the killings, Lindsay appeared appropriate and normal. The pediatrician never saw a flat affect or anything that caused her to make a postpartum referral. Is that a point for the prosecution, or is that a point for the defense, in that it was spontaneous and it came on out of nowhere? Or what it seems to be, the prosecution was saying that she's had these issues going forward for a long time. And if that's what the prosecution is trying to prove, somebody saying that she was perfectly fine, I don't know. The defense attorney then kind of went on the attack that Dr. Rocher was not Lindsay's doctor. She didn't know that Lindsay was seeing a psychiatrist. She didn't know she'd been prescribed Zoloft. She didn't know about other psychiatric providers, didn't know about the medications, didn't know about severe insomnia, didn't know about the suicide hotline contacts, didn't know about the treatment at McLean. The defense attorneys, of course she looked good. What, you wouldn't suspect anything because you didn't know all of this background. Then he talked about how Lindsay was as a mom, and the pediatrician said the children appeared happy and healthy, and that she appeared to be a doting and concerned mother. And Reddington says she was a hell of a mother, wasn't she? And the answer was basically, yeah. Who won that round? Probably the defense. The Commonwealth, she appeared normal. And the defense was like, yeah, if you didn't know what was going on, how can you know? Then we have preschool and daycare witnesses, Susan Freon, Susan Bertolo, and Stephanie Williams. And again, this is like, really? The kids appeared happy, healthy, engaged, cared for. Lindsay was appropriate at drop-off and pickup. Nobody saw abuse. Nobody reported anybody. Nobody saw bizarre behavior. Again, normal family life. But one teacher testified that Cora had mentioned her mother was in the hospital and that she missed her. And Stephanie Williams described January 23rd, the day before the incident, when Cora wasn't feeling well. Lindsay came in, picked up her daughter from the cot, and said, "Come on, let's get Dawson and we'll go home." Williams described Lindsay as a very loving mother who cared about her children. And that's what the prosecution is putting on. And you have to think, what are they gaining? Like, how is this helping their case? Do you feel this way? How is this helping their case when everybody says she's a wonderful mother? Because remember what we heard in the opening, and I don't remember exactly what the details were, but she wanted to be free from the kids. That's why the unaliving for herself was a means to an end, like the fake, the false thing that she wasn't really serious about it. She just didn't want the responsibility of the children. But here we hear about how great of a mom is, and she wasn't mean towards them and had no motive to unalive them. Again, it seems like a little like the roles were reversed. But then we have Andrea Hennigan, who is a friend and a Massachusetts general labor and delivery nurse. And she was up on what was going on with Lindsay. She had known her professionally for years. She said Lindsay was a nurse, and she described her. A nurse is taking care of patients, being concerned, all that stuff. And she described nursing as a calling for Lindsay, that she was smart, attentive, nurturing, caring, and excellent with patients. Now, in November of 2022, Lindsay told Andrea that she wasn't ready to return to work mentally. She talked about insomnia, not feeling like herself, brain fog, medication, seeking a therapist, and concern about being able to function appropriately as a nurse. She was concerned about the people in her care, not only at home, but at work. And her friends were telling her, look, get some help. And they even found some postpartum perinatal resources for her. Then, in January 2nd, Lindsay tells her group of friends that she's involved in an intensive program. But then, on January 23rd, she said she's still working with the psychiatrist to find medication that would let her sleep at night but function during the day, and that the medication had side effects that made the process difficult. And when we've heard some of this about the medication, it's like this one keeps you up, and then this one takes you down, and then you need this one to do this because the other one is doing this. They're all doing things. You have to take one to counteract the other one. And not sleeping, talk about not eating and you get hangry. I don't know, is there a word for insomnia and not sleeping? The Commonwealth, the prosecution is talking about, but you could understand her. She wasn't incoherent. She didn't feel like she was going to hurt anybody. She didn't say anything, and she was still hopeful. But then the defense says, yeah, she was hopeful. She was doing everything that she could. She got Hennigan to talk about Lindsay, and she said she was a non-complainer. She was private. She very much wanted to be a mom. She had always wanted to have a family, and she was very concerned for her children. And I think that would be someone, if you have someone who's a nurse and someone who's a mom, that's the thing that you would look for. But who is this helping? And it's interesting. I think I've said that witnesses that we would normally expect to be on the defense side are on the prosecution side, but they appear to be for the defense. It's very crazy that the defense is the prosecution just has all these witnesses, and maybe the defense feels that the prosecution is doing a good job of doing his work for him. We'll see. We also hear the fact that not only was Lindsay telling Patrick that this was going on, she's telling her friends and coworkers. And these are not just regular folks. These are medical people that know the seriousness and the understanding of, and not that it makes any person different from any other person, but I don't know. Sometimes, and not in this situation, but I tell my friends and family sometimes when the cop tells you that they're scared and they're worried, you should be very worried. I don't know if that it kind of explains it. Then we had Bethany DeCalbus, a friend and a therapist. And Bethany said that Lindsay became very tired. She started getting more and more tired. She talked about inability to sleep even when the children were sleeping. And she said she feels like a zombie. And the prosecution was basically saying, but did she look like one? And she said she looked tired. She could socialize, communicate, attend the birthday party, and interact with the children. And I feel like a zombie. I know how it is when I haven't been able to sleep. And sometimes you just got to get up and do what you got to do. I'm sure you all know that. With or without mental illness, or sometimes there's nobody else and you got to do what you got to do. I don't know. Did it help? Did it not? The defense talks about the fact that even though Bethany was a friend of hers and a therapist, she said, but the defense is like, but you're like, that wasn't your job to analyze her. They were just people having dinner. She didn't sit there interrogating her and going through the standards or anything like that. And clarified the fact that Lindsay loved her children. Of note, we wouldn't say that Bethany was hostile, but she was very careful. A lot of I don't remember, not specifically. I'd have to check on that. And she wasn't going to go along with what either side was presenting. Now, was that because she is a therapist and she can't appear? Because when you have licensure, we'll put it that way, attached to yourself, you have to be very careful about how you testify, how you present yourself, how you conduct yourself, maybe not overstepping, didn't want to be making an opinion for treatment that didn't happen and things of that nature. So maybe that's why she was being very cautious. We had another friend talking about dark thoughts and medications, and the defense attorney started talking to her about her state police interview with Lindsay, talking about Lexapro and asking what the friend's experience with Lexapro had been. And then at the end of January, Lindsay had communicated that she was having dark thoughts. There's a beginning creeping up, because remember, up to this, all it was insomnia. Now it's dark thoughts. And the friend said that this was the first time she had heard something raising concern in her about the mental health. And that to me plays to the defense, that it's not this criminal intent that she just wanted to get rid of the children and have this different life. But no, that once she started doing these things, that these things started, I don't know whether medication compounding or whatever, however they're going to present it, but it starts adding up. It's very hard to tell. But to me, I don't think the prosecution is doing themselves any favors, the Commonwealth. Then we have Christopher Clancy, Patrick's father, and he talked about, it was kind of hard to watch. He talked about Lindsay being a good mother, all-American family. And then they were talking about Thanksgiving and the incident with, I think it was Dawson, trying to get Dawson seated, and that Lindsay had a blankness, staring into the distance, sometimes nervousness, and what could have been causing that. He described this as frustration, and he talked about getting her a plate. And then the defense attorney asked, because I guess she took him by the arm and was trying to seat him at the table. And the defense was like, did you think that was abusive? And he says no. And talked about the fact that both sets of grandparents were helping the family because things were so difficult. So again, trying to show how bad it actually was. It just, yeah, it was kind of hard to watch because you think about the loss and everything that's going on. Then we heard about a family visit shortly before the tragedy. That was a great, nice afternoon. Lindsay appeared normal. She talked fine. The family spent hours together. Nothing was out of the ordinary. And the defense left that alone. The more she can look normal, I guess they think, the better that it is. But it is very repetitive, on and on. Like, how much of this do we have to hear? And one of the things, again, when I say I want to know more from a psychiatric profession, and I don't know if that's a neurologist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, like who talks about that, but how fast and how serious can a psychosis come on, or these voices and stuff? It sounds like, and things that I've tried to look at, I've tried to do some research, that it can vary. And we've heard a little bit that everybody is different. You just don't really know. Do people exhibit those behaviors all the time? And we heard that. No, they can appear completely normal. Then we have Sergeant Andrew, I can't even say the last name, Chioko, I can't even say that, talking about the surveillance at the CVS. We got the timeline about with Patrick that he came in at 5:32:32. He left about 5:37:08. The 3V restaurant, remember the jury went out and took a look at that. They arrived at 5:54:14. They left around 5:51:01. I'm saying they, but I mean him. And the Commonwealth had them say that there was no timestamp discrepancies. And a timeline is very important in the case because you have to show means, motive, and opportunity. All right. And the state, remember, has to show, the Commonwealth has to show premeditation. And here's a question. How much premeditation is premeditation? We might have talked about that in some of the early videos. Is it 30 seconds? Is it a minute? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 5 minutes? Is it a year? How much is premeditation? How much time was she alone? How much time did she have to think about this? How long was Patrick really away from the house? Was there enough time for her to do what she's accused of doing? He was asked about additional blood staining outside on the shingles that they didn't take the night of the incident, which that just didn't look good. They should have taken care of it that night. Then we're talking about a 2021 post that Lindsay made in a group called Attachment Parenting for Littles, in a Facebook group. And I guess she made this comment, the most difficult human I've ever encountered. And she said she could not get through the day without being frustrated, but saying she loves him with all the love in my heart. And I don't think that makes it a bad statement per se. You can say it's a bad statement, but I personally remember taking care of my mom with dementia, and I loved her with all my heart, but I could say the most difficult human I've encountered. And I can say that before dementia too, but loved her with all my heart and would never want anything bad to happen to her. I don't know. We have to apply this stuff to our own life and the facts. And what do we think from this? This can kind of look bad, seeing that she was frustrated. This was 2021. Who knows? New mom, all kinds of things go on. Like I said, I'm sure we've all had incidents in our life that we got frustrated, things happened, maybe even a little worse. And I don't know, you're going to factor that into your decisions. Who knows? That this was a group, a support group, and she was trying to make things better. That's why she was in the group. Then things got a little crazy after the jury left and the judge was hearing, and I did that original video about defense witnesses that the defense wanted to call. They had talked about it before court, and the judge said, we're going to wait till later. And the defense attorney, Reddington, he was like, look, I'm a solo practitioner, means he works by himself. The Commonwealth has all these people. We heard that originally the first day he was arguing this. And he said, it's just me and my son. And he said he's frustrated, because the Commonwealth saying, we haven't prepared for this. We haven't prepared for this. And depending on how all of this is working, whether he's being personally paid or contractually paid or whatever, it's hard to build up a team to specifically go for this. But he also said that he had noticed the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is a big attorney office. So they could pull people to look at these witnesses and stuff like that. Whereas he's just one guy. I don't know what's going on with his sons. Again, we talked about these witnesses a little bit. Dr. La Posada and wants to talk about the mechanism of injury for Lindsay's spinal cord injury. Dr. Volkovich from emergency medicine talking about neck and wrist injuries and unaliving events, because we've heard the superficial, fake, blah, 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 blah. Of course, the defense needs somebody to rebut that. He needs somebody to say, and I think I talked about it in a previous video, how deep is too deep? What if you try to do something and you think it's going to be one way and then it turns out to be another way, either from a pain standpoint or I can't do it or different things like that. And then you have to try another way. That I don't know if that cuts down your intent or not intent or whatever, but we have what looks like 3 mechanisms here. We had the cutting instrument, we had the drink with the pills, the medication in there, and we had the window. How much does it take to make it serious? And I'm not being facetious here. I'm not being on one side or the other, but I think that's a general question. How many cuts does it take? How deep do the cuts have to be? Where is the definitive line? And I think that's going to hurt the Commonwealth, because I just think they're harping on this superficial thing. We have Dr. Condi, who's a psychiatrist, to talk about medications and whether things were appropriate. And then they were going back and forth about what occurred outside the window. And it just, talking about Spider-Man and stuff, you can tell that the defense attorney, he's got to be beyond frustrated how we're frustrated. And then the Commonwealth is saying they've got to investigate the experts' credentials, the publications, the previous testimony, the methodology, rebuttal evidence. They questioned the background about Condi, whether she's a toxicologist or not. Would that be the appropriate expert? Oh, here's the word, cumulative. I wrote that down, cumulative. And that's what I was saying before. If anybody has been cumulative, it's the Commonwealth. It's not the defense. And I'm not saying I'm on one side or the other. I'm irritated with the state, but because I haven't been shown what I expect to be shown. And these witnesses are crazy. And I don't know if that's related to the Smith versus Arizona or whatever, but I am over all these witnesses and I feel that they are very cumulative. And again, that's the word that we heard in the Tyler Robinson prelim. Cumulative. Cannot do that. You can't keep piling all the same information over and over again. And then, shocker of shocker, the Commonwealth says that they are not claiming Lindsay's attempt at unaliving was fake. That's the gist I got from the opening statement and from these witnesses. But they're saying now that we agree that she was trying to unalive herself, but she chose methods that were unlikely to succeed. Like, I don't know. You got to go through 3 again. That's for you guys to decide. But I'm flabbergasted now. And maybe you can go back and look at the opening. Maybe now they're getting a whiff. I would call it a whiff or a gist of the case. What the defense is able to uncover. Maybe witness testimony isn't going as well as the Commonwealth thought. Maybe people are reading the comments. Maybe people in the office are reading comments on the YouTube and hearing people are ticked off. People are saying blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, now we're going to say this. What happens? Does that even help? Or does that give a hand to the defense? I don't know. This is very interesting. So the judge was like trying to be fair here. Yes. He kind of said he's likely to allow La Posada to talk about injuries being consistent with landing on your head, possibly allow the Commonwealth a rebuttal expert. Kind of skeptical about allowing an expert to say this was an unaliving attempt and that ultimate inference may belong to the jury as to what I'm talking about, those mechanisms, those actions are, and willing to allow doctors to describe whether wounds were actually significant. I think that's important because how many times have we heard superficial? And he wants to review Condi's report. Again, that's the question on the toxicology. And was skeptical that standard of care belongs in the criminal trial, which I have mentioned. He's lining up his witnesses for the civil trial. That's just my personal opinion. And yes, who do we think won? We don't know. I don't know how it's going to turn out. Let me just make sure I don't have any other notes here. And that's it. And the next video, we're going to talk about, we heard some of the treating psychiatric people, whatever. That was very interesting. So again, apologies about this being late. It's been a little difficult to follow. It seems like everybody's getting frustrated, and hopefully this will move on soon. I hate to even say that, but either side, you want to have a successful court process that follows the rules and does everything. And it just seems that it could have been done differently. It could have been done better, but we don't know yet. We'll just have to wait and see. Thank you for being patient with me. And as always, I will see you on the next one.